The air in courtroom 3B was so thick with tension, you could taste the metallic tang of hatred. A 7 months pregnant Elena Carter, her face ashen and slick with a cold sweat, stared at her husband Marcus. He sat beside his lawyer, looking as bored as if he were waiting for a taxi, and next to him in the gallery sat Seraphina Hayes, the mistress. She was smiling a sly, satisfied little smirk as the judge shuffled her papers. And in that moment, as her husband's lawyer began to speak, Elena's world went black, and she collapsed. To the outside world, Elena and Marcus Carter were a Manhattan fairy tale. Their penthouse on the Upper East Side had views that could make a billionaire weep. Carter Innovations. Marcus's tech empire was the darling of Wall Street, and Elena was the perfect corporate wife, beautiful, graceful, intelligent, and the chairwoman of every important charity committee in the city. Their life, captured in the glossy pages of Vogue and Forbes, was a curated masterpiece. Their annual Winter Solstice Gala was the event of the season. Marcus, with his sharp, custom-tailored Tom Ford suits and disarming smile, would toast his rock, his anchor, his beautiful Elena. And Elena, draped in Dior, would smile her heart, swelling with a genuine, if naive, love. She had met him when she was a 24-year-old art curator, and he was a 34-year-old entrepreneur on the rise. He had pursued her with a relentless, dazzling focus. He didn't just buy her flowers, he bought out the entire florist shop. He didn't just take her to dinner, he flew her to Paris for the weekend, just for the escargots. He was a force of nature, and she was swept away. For 8 years the fairy tale held. She put her own career on hold to manage their homes, the penthouse, the Hamptons estate, the Aspen chalet. She managed his social calendar, vetted his new hires, and charmed his investors. She was in every sense his partner. And then, after years of trying, the final piece of the perfect picture fell into place. She was pregnant. Eleanor had been ecstatic. She planned a surprise, filling their dining room with hundreds of white baby's breath flowers and placing a tiny pair of designer baby shoes on his dinner plate. When Marcus came home, he didn't even notice the flowers. He was on his phone, barking at his COO. He glanced at the table, saw the shoes and his face. Didn't light up. It didn't do anything. "What's this?" he'd asked, his voice flat. We're having a baby. Marcus," she said, her smile faltering. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Elena, this is really not a good time. We're in the middle of the Q4 projections." He loosened his tie. "We'll talk about it later." He never did. Later became the most terrifying word in her vocabulary. That was the first crack. The others followed in rapid succession. The late nights at the office turned into weekends at conferences. The texts he'd hide when she entered the room. The scent of a perfume, a cheap, cloying gardenia scent that wasn't hers, clinging to his suit jackets. Elena wasn't stupid. She was just hopeful. She believed in the man she married. She believed in the life they had built. She told herself it was just stress. The company, the baby. It was a lot. The hope shattered 6 weeks later. He'd left his laptop open on his study desk. It was an accident, a rare lapse in his newfound ironclad security. A chat window was open. The name on the chat was SH. He's still not telling her coward. "Marcus, give me time, Sarah. She's fragile right now. The pregnancy. SH. Fragile. Or is she just a good actress? You said you'd be done with this by now, Marcus. You promised me. Marcus and I will. The prenup is complicated. SH. Then uncomplicated. I'm tired of being the secret. I want what's mine. I want to be Mrs. Carter. Make it happen. Or I will." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Her hands, resting on the swell of her stomach, went ice cold. S.H. She knew that name. Serafina Hayes. His new executive assistant, a 25-year-old with legs up to her ears and an ambition so naked it was embarrassing. Elena herself had interviewed the girl and had a bad feeling, but Marcus had insisted. "She's hungry," he'd said. "We need hungry people." Elena backed away from the laptop as if it were a snake. She stumbled into their cavernous marble bathroom and threw up for 10 straight minutes, the sobs racking her body until she was empty. The fairy tale hadn't just ended. It had been a lie. A sick, elaborate, beautifully decorated lie. The gilded cage was just a cage, and the door had just slammed shut. The confrontation was not the cinematic, plate-throwing, screaming match Eleanor might have imagined. It was cold. It was quiet. And it was brutal. She waited for him in the living room, the city lights twinkling behind her, like a million mocking eyes. The laptop was closed back in his study, just as he'd left it. She had decided to play the only card she had left her dignity. He came in just after 2 a.m. He didn't even flinch at seeing her sitting there in the dark. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, unbuttoning his waistcoat. The scent of gardenia filled the room, a poisonous fog. "Who is Serafina Hayes Marcus?" Her voice was surprisingly steady. Marcus stopped. He didn't turn around. He just stood with his back to her, a perfect silhouette against the skyline. "She's my assistant." "No," Elena said, standing up. The baby kicked a sharp reminder of what was at stake. "Who is she?" "To you." He turned slowly. The charming mask was gone. His eyes, which she had once thought were a warm, deep brown, looked like 2 chips of ice. "She is the woman I am going to be with." Just like that. No apology, no remorse, no explanation. It was a statement of fact, like, "It's Tuesday," or "We're out of milk." The air left Elena's lungs. For how long now? Long enough. He finally took off his jacket, tossing it onto a $50,000 antique chair. "Look, Elena, these things happen. People change. We're not the same people we were when we met." "I'm pregnant, Marcus," she screamed, the sound tearing from her throat. "I am 7 months pregnant with your child." "Are you?" The question hung in the air, vicious and heavy. What did you just say?" she whispered. "I said, are you?" He walked toward her, his face a mask of cold calculation. "You've been different, Elena. Distant. Maybe I wasn't the only one finding companionship elsewhere." This was a new level of cruelty. He was projecting. He was twisting his own monstrous betrayal and trying to pin it on her. You bastard," she breathed. "You know this baby is yours." "I know no such thing," he sneered. "And frankly, I don't care. The arrangement is over. My lawyer, Robert Sullivan, will be contacting you in the morning. He'll be generous if you're cooperative." "Cooperative? You're throwing me out." "I'm upgrading," a new voice said. Elena's head snapped to the doorway. There, leaning against the jamb, was Serafina Hayes. She was wearing a red dress so tight it looked painted on, and she was holding a key to their apartment. "Hello, Elena," Serafina said, her voice dripping with smug victory. She walked past Elena, running a possessive hand over a marble statue. "This place is going to need a lot of work. It's so dated." "Get out," Elena whispered, her body trembling. "Oh, sweetie, I think you have it backwards," Serafina said, sauntering over to Marcus and kissing him a long, slow, obscene kiss. "You're the one who needs to get out. Marcus is done playing house with you." Marcus wrapped his arm around Serafina's waist, pulling her tight against him. He looked at Elena, his wife, the mother of his child, with complete and utter indifference. Robert will have the papers sent to your sister's place, he said. I assume you'll be going there. Don't come back, Elena. The doormen will be instructed not to let you in. My security will pack your things. Elena just stared. She looked from his cold face to Serafina's triumphant smirk. She saw the matching predatory hunger in their eyes. They weren't just ending a marriage, they were performing an execution. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply turned, walked to the elevator, and pressed the down button. As the brass doors slid shut, the last thing she saw was Serafina Hayes laughing, her head thrown back as she traced the lapel of Marcus's suit. The elevator's descent felt like a burial. She emerged onto the cold, quiet street at 2:30 a.m., a pregnant woman with nothing but the clothes on her back and a storm brewing in her soul. The fairy tale was dead. The war had just begun. The next 48 hours were a blur of humiliation and terror. Elena did, in fact, go to her sister's. Olivia, a no-nonsense ER nurse, opened the door of her one-bedroom Brooklyn apartment, took one look at Elena's shattered face, and simply pulled her inside. She didn't say, "I told you so," though she'd never trusted Marcus. She just made tea, set up the pull-out couch, and let Elena cry. The call from Robert Sullivan came at 9 a.m. sharp. Sullivan was a shark in a $10,000 suit known for making problems disappear. "Mrs. Carter. Well, Miss Andres soon, I suppose." He began, his voice a oily purr. "Marcus is prepared to be reasonable. He's offering a one-time lump sum payment of $50,000. In exchange, you will sign a full NDA, waive all rights to spousal support, and, this is the important part, you will agree to a statement confirming that the child you are carrying is not his." Elena, sitting at her sister's rickety kitchen table, felt the phone go cold in her hand. $50,000, she repeated, her voice hollow. Their sofa cost more than that. "And I have to say my baby isn't his. It's a very generous offer, considering the circumstances," Sullivan said. "My client has evidence of your infidelity, Miss Andres. We have affidavits, witnesses. It would be very messy for you to fight this, and very, very public. Think of the child. This way, you get a clean break and a fresh start." "Witnesses? What affidavits?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, but I assure you our case is airtight. Serafina Hayes, for one, is prepared to testify about your erratic behavior and multiple visitors." The lie was so audacious, so utterly diabolical, it took Eleanor's breath away. They weren't just pushing her out. They were trying to erase her, to paint her as the villain. They were going to use Serafina, the mistress, to lie on a stand and call her the adulterer. "No," Elena said, a new cold anger rising from her stomach. "No." Sullivan sounded genuinely surprised. "No, I will not take your $50,000. I will not sign an NDA, and I will never say my child is not my husband's. You tell Marcus. You tell him I'll see him in court." She hung up the phone. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was rage. "Liv," she said, turning to her sister, "I need a lawyer. Not a nice one. I need a killer." Olivia knew exactly who to call. David Chen was not a killer. Not in the traditional pinstriped suit shouting in courtroom sense. He was young, meticulous, and looked more like a tech startup intern than a divorce attorney. But he was, as Olivia put it, a relentless bulldog. He worked out of a cramped office in Queens, and his specialty was finding financial needles in corrupt haystacks. He listened to Elena's story for an hour, his face unreadable. He reviewed the prenuptial agreement she'd thankfully had the foresight to bring. "It's a standard infidelity clause," David said, tapping his pen. "It states that if either party is proven to be unfaithful, the other party is entitled to 70% of all marital assets, and the cheating party must pay all legal fees. He knows that, Elena said. That's why he's lying. He's trying to flip the script to use the clause against me. Exactly, David nodded. He's not just trying to avoid paying you. He's trying to bankrupt you. With his evidence, he's petitioning the court to not only deny you spousal support, but to actually have you pay him for fraud and emotional distress. It's audacious. So what do we do? Elena asked, her voice small. He has Robert Sullivan. He has all the money. He has witnesses. David leaned forward, and for the first time, Elena saw the bulldog. He's arrogant, and arrogance breeds sloppiness. He thinks he can just invent a narrative and buy a judge. But he made one mistake. He's lit a fire under you, and he's going to find out what happens when you corner a mother. He pointed to the infidelity clause. This is our weapon. He thinks he's the only one who can use it. But he's the one who's been having a public, flagrant affair with his assistant. We just have to prove it. But they're claiming I cheated, Elena protested. It's my word against theirs. No, David said, a thin smile playing on his lips. It's not. He's also claiming the baby isn't his. This is his legal anchor for the whole case. But it is his. I know, David said. And you know. But the court doesn't. So, we're going to prove it. We're going to petition for a court-ordered, non-invasive prenatal paternity test. We'll get the results, we'll present them in court, and his entire she's a lying adulterer case will crumble to dust. And then, David said, his eyes hardening, the infidelity clause activates, and we take everything. The plan was simple. It was direct. And it was terrifying. It meant facing Marcus in court. It meant having her most private life dissected by lawyers. It meant seeing her again. Do it, Elena said, placing her hand on her stomach. File the papers. Let's fight. The Honourable Judge Amelia Warren presided over Family Court Division A with the weary cynicism of a woman who had seen every possible way one human being could disappoint another. Her courtroom was beige, poorly lit, and smelled faintly of floor wax and stale coffee. It was here in this drab, unfeeling room that Eleanor Carter's life would be decided. Eleanor and David sat at the plaintiff's table. She wore her only court-appropriate outfit, a simple navy maternity dress Olivia had bought for her. She felt exposed, a whale beached in a sea of hostility. Across the aisle, the defense table was a fortress of arrogance. Marcus looked impeccable in a charcoal grey suit, his face set in a mask of mild annoyance. His lawyer, Robert Sullivan, was flanked by two junior associates who looked like they'd been grown in a lab. And in the front row of the gallery, directly in Eleanor's line of sight, sat Seraphina Hayes. She was a vision of malicious intent. She wore a tight white cashmere dress, a string of pearls, and a smug, unwavering smile. She looked, Elena realized with a jolt of nausea, like she was intentionally dressing as the new and improved Mrs. Carter. She was there as a spectator, a heckler, a living, breathing testament to Elena's failure. Every few moments, she would catch Elena's eye, and her smile would widen a silent, vicious taunt. All rise. The bailiff monotone and Judge Warren entered. The first hour was a blur of legal posturing. Sullivan was arguing that the prenuptial agreement should be nullified entirely, claiming Elena had entered into the marriage under fraudulent pretenses. Your Honor, Sullivan began, his voice booming with false sincerity. Mr. Carter is the victim here. He is a man who built an empire only to discover that his home, the one place he should have felt safe, was built on a foundation of lies. Elena flinched. David put a reassuring hand on her arm. We have evidence, Sullivan continued, that Ms. Andres, not Mrs. Carter, has been engaged in a pattern of deceit and infidelity for years, and most egregiously, she has attempted to pass off another man's child as Mr. Carter's in a last-ditch attempt to secure a financial windfall. Objection, David snapped, rising to his feet. Mr. Sullivan is painting a narrative for which he has zero evidence. This is slander, Your Honor. It's not slander if it's true, Sullivan shot back. We have a witness, Ms. Serafina Hayes. He gestured to the gallery. Serafina stood up, her face, a mask of faux sympathy. Yes, I'm here, she said, her voice trembling with crocodile tears. I'm here to support Marcus, to tell the truth about what I saw. Ms. Hayes, you will sit down and be silent until you are called. Judge Warren snapped, her eyes flashing. Serafina sat, but her smirk returned stronger this time. She'd done her damage. The seed was planted. Sullivan, sensing blood in the water, went in for the kill. Your Honor, my client is not just fighting for his assets. He's fighting for his name. Ms. Andres has a history of instability, of anxiety, of fantasies. He opened a file and pulled out a document. These are medical records we've subpoenaed from her therapist. She's been treated for acute anxiety and mild dissociation. This is a woman who, when faced with the consequences of her own actions, lies. This was the ultimate violation. Her therapy, the one safe space she'd had where she'd complained about the loneliness of her marriage, was now being twisted into a weapon. She's a gold digger, Your Honor. Sullivan's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. She saw her marriage failing, so she went out. She had an affair, she got pregnant, and now she's come to this court expecting a payout. From the gallery, Serafina let out a small, audible tsk, a sound of pity that was so perfectly staged, Elena wanted to scream. He's lying! Elena shot to her feet, her voice cracking. The room spun. All eyes were on her. Ms. Andres, sit down, Judge Warren ordered. He's lying, Elena repeated, clutching her stomach. He's the one who cheated. She is his mistress. He's lying about... The air in the room was suddenly too thin. The walls were closing in. Sullivan's face blurred. Serafina's triumphant smile seemed to grow, to stretch, to fill the entire room, a grotesque Cheshire cat grin. Elena put a hand to her temple. The baby gave a hard, painful kick, as if it too was protesting. He's lying, she whispered one last time. And then her knees buckled. The floor rushed up to meet her. The last thing she heard before the world went black was Serafina's light musical and utterly unconcerned laugh. The courtroom erupted. Bailiff! Judge Warren's voice boomed. David Chen was at Elena's side, in an instant, shielding her from the gawking gallery. Elena, can you hear me? Marcus Carter didn't move. He simply watched his face, impassive, as his pregnant wife lay unconscious on the courtroom floor. Serafina, her hand, clapped over her mouth in mock shock, whispered something in his ear. Clear the courtroom, the judge ordered. Recess for 30 minutes. Somebody call the paramedics. Elena came to on a bench in the hallway, a worried-looking paramedic shining a penlight in her eyes. Olivia was there, having sprinted from her car when she got David's text. She was holding a cup of water, her face a mask of fury. Blood pressure is high, but not dangerously so, the paramedic said. This looks like a vasovagal syncope, a simple faint brought on by extreme stress. No kidding, Olivia muttered, glaring daggers at the closed courtroom door, behind which she could hear Marcus and Sullivan arguing. I'm not going to the hospital, Elena said, her voice hoarse. She sat up the room, still tilting slightly. Elena, you need to rest, David urged, his professional calm rattled. No, she said, and her voice was steel. She looked at David. He's not winning. We're finishing this. Today. She was pale, her hands were trembling, but her eyes were twin blue flames. The fainting spell hadn't broken her. It had burned away the last of her fear. She stood, wobbly but determined, and pushed back into the courtroom. The gallery was empty now, save for Marcus Sullivan and a very annoyed-looking Serafina who was texting furiously. "Your Honor," Elena said, her voice ringing out in the quiet room. Judge Warren looked up surprised. "Ms. Andres, I am recommending you seek medical—" "With all due respect, Your Honor," Elena said, walking back to her table. "The best thing for my health and my baby's health is to end this. We have one piece of evidence that will clarify Mr. Sullivan's fantasies." Judge Warren stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Proceed, Mr. Chen." David stood. "Your Honor, as you know, Mr. Carter's entire case rests on the premise that my client was unfaithful and that her child is not his. This is the linchpin of his request to nullify the prenuptial agreement." "We stand by that assertion," Sullivan interrupted. "Then you'll be very interested in this," David said. "Per our pre-trial motion, which Mr. Carter fought and we won, we compelled a non-invasive court-admissible prenatal paternity test. The samples were taken from both my client and Mr. Carter 2 weeks ago and sent to LabCorp Genetics, a facility chosen by the defense. The results were sealed and delivered to this court this morning." A new, very different silence fell. Marcus's bored expression finally cracked. He looked at Sullivan. "You said that was a delaying tactic?" "It was—" Sullivan hissed back, his confidence wavering. "Mr. Chen is correct," Judge Warren said, holding up a manila envelope. "I received this at 8 a.m. Given the theatrics of the morning, I believe now is the time to review it." Serafina stopped texting. She looked up, her smile tightening. This wasn't part of her plan. "With the court's permission," Judge Warren said, "I am opening the certified results of the DNA analysis." She tore the seal. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. She unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the page. Sullivan stood. "Your Honor, I must object. A DNA test doesn't prove. It proves paternity." Mr. Sullivan, the judge, cut him off, her voice like ice. "Which is the exact thing you've spent the last hour denying." She looked up, her gaze settling first on Robert Sullivan, then on Marcus. "The court has the results from LabCorp Genetics." She read, her voice clear and strong. "Based on the DNA analysis of the samples provided, the probability of paternity for Marcus Carter, the alleged father, is 99.99999%. A collective gasp even from the bailiff. Elena closed her eyes, tears of pure, unadulterated relief streaming down her face. David Chen gripped her shoulder, squeezing tight. Marcus Carter went deathly pale. That's impossible. It's a mistake. The lab you chose, Mr. Carter." Judge Warren raised an eyebrow. "This changes nothing," Sullivan shouted, shuffling his papers. "Paternity does not preclude infidelity. She could have slept with multiple—" "Oh, shut up, Sullivan," Judge Warren said, her patience clearly evaporated. "Your entire case was built on a lie. You've slandered this woman, accused her of fraud, and dragged her mental health through the mud, all based on a premise that has just been factually disproven." Serafina was no longer smiling. She was furious. She glared at Elena, her eyes filled with a venom so pure it was shocking. She stood up from the gallery. "It doesn't matter," she spat, her voice no longer a sweet whisper. "So it's his stupid kid. Who cares? He's still leaving her for me. He's mine." "Ms. Hayes, you are in contempt of court," Judge Warren roared. "Bailiff!" "Don't worry, darling," Serafina said, ignoring the judge and locking eyes with Marcus. "We'll crush her. I'm not going anywhere." "You're right about that," David Chen said, standing up. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a scalpel. All eyes turned to him. "Your Honor," David said, "that was the first DNA test we ran, but it wasn't the only one." The energy in the courtroom shifted. It went from tense to electric. Robert Sullivan scoffed, but he looked worried. "Your Honor, what is this? More games from the plaintiff. We just settled the paternity issue." "This is not a game, Mr. Sullivan," David said, walking to his briefcase. "And we haven't settled the infidelity issue, which, as you'll recall, is the key to the prenuptial agreement." He pulled out a second identical-looking sealed manila envelope. "Your Honor." David continued. "My client was faced with an impossible situation. A husband with unlimited resources claiming she was unfaithful. We knew we had to find evidence to prove what we already knew, that Mr. Carter was the one in violation of the marital contract. And you thought a second redundant paternity test would—" "What?" Sullivan sneered. "Oh, it's not redundant," David said, placing the envelope on the judge's bench. "This isn't a paternity test. This is a familial DNA test." Marcus looked confused. "A what? What does that have to do with anything?" Serafina, who had been ordered back to her seat by the bailiff, sat forward, her eyes narrowed. The smiling, smug mask was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating curiosity. She still thought she was in control. David Chen turned to face Marcus, and Serafina, his expression unreadable. While investigating Mr. Carter's finances for discovery, David began. "We found some oddities, specifically repeated large six-figure transfers to an S. Hayes. We assumed this was Ms. Serafina Hayes as part of her compensation." Serafina smirked. "A girl's got to get paid." "But the transfers started 3 years ago," David said, "long before Ms. Hayes was hired as his assistant. We also found in the same financial batch monthly payments to a private investigator based in Seattle, a Mr. James McBain." Marcus Carter's face, for the first time, showed a flicker of genuine panic. That's private business. It has no bearing on this case." "Objection relevance," Sullivan yelled. "It is entirely relevant, Your Honor." David's voice finally rose. "We subpoenaed the PI's files. Mr. Carter hadn't hired Mr. McBain to investigate his wife. He'd hired him to find his father." The room was utterly still. Marcus Carter's father. David continued, his voice like a narrator in a true crime podcast. Was a man named Daniel Peterson. He was a truck driver who abandoned Marcus and his mother when Marcus was 5. He disappeared, started a new life. Marcus, it seems, has been obsessed with finding him, or at least finding out what happened to him. This is a gross invasion of privacy. Marcus was on his feet, now his face purple. "Sit down, Mr. Carter," Judge Warren commanded. "Mr. Chen, you are on a very thin rope. Get to the point." "The point, Your Honor," David said, "is that the private investigator found him. Or rather, found what was left of him. Daniel Peterson died in 2010. But he hadn't been alone. He had in fact started a new family in Seattle." David paused and his eyes locked onto Serafina. "He had a daughter." Serafina's face, which had been a mask of bored contempt, suddenly went completely, utterly blank. "A daughter," David repeated, his voice dropping. "A daughter who grew up in poverty. A daughter who at 22 suddenly started receiving anonymous wire transfers. Enough to move to New York, get new clothes, and get a job at a high-powered tech firm. A daughter born in Seattle, named Serafina Hayes." Time stopped. Serafina let out a sound, a small, strangled gasp. "No, that's a lie." "Is it Ms. Hayes?" David said. Were you not born in Seattle? Is your mother's maiden name not Peterson? Did you not, 3 years ago, suddenly connect with a wealthy older mentor who wanted to help you? He's not. It's not. Serafina was shaking her head, but her eyes were wide with dawning, abject horror. Marcus knew, Elena whispered, her voice full of revulsion. Oh my God, he knew. No, Marcus shouted. I didn't. I found her. Yes, I was. I was helping her. My sister. I was helping my sister. Your half-sister, Mr. Carter, David corrected him. The one you've been sleeping with. The one you were about to install in your wife's home. Liar! Serafina shrieked, launching herself from the bench. He's lying. Tell them, Marcus. Tell them it's a lie. We're not. But how to prove such a scandalous allegation? David Chen continued as if she hadn't spoken. It's a good thing Ms. Hayes is so careless. He held up a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a styrofoam coffee cup. From Ms. Hayes's deposition 3 days ago, David explained. She drank a latte and left the cup. We sent it to the same lab. We asked them to run a comparative analysis against Mr. Carter's DNA, which was already on file. He tapped the second envelope on the judge's bench. Those, Your Honor, are the results. Judge Warren, her face a thundercloud, tore open the second envelope. The room was so quiet, the only sound was the rustle of paper and Serafina's ragged, desperate breathing. Oh, dear. God, the judge whispered, reading the report. She looked up, her face, pale with disgust. She looked at Marcus. She looked at Serafina. The DNA analysis confirms. Judge Warren's voice was low and trembling with rage. The DNA analysis confirms that Marcus Carter and Serafina Hayes share a paternal DNA link consistent with that of half-siblings. Serafina Hayes, the smiling mistress. The victor, the new Mrs. Carter-in-waiting, turned to Marcus, her face a contorted mask of disbelief and sickness. Marcus, she whimpered. Is it true, your father? Daniel Peterson. Marcus couldn't speak. He was staring at the floor, his entire empire, his entire life disintegrating around him. And as the full, horrific, biblical weight of the truth settled on her, Serafina's perfectly made-up face crumpled. She turned, stumbled to the nearest courtroom trash can, and was violently, horrifyingly sick. The mistress was no longer smiling. The sound of Judge Warren's gavel was not a simple tap. It was a crack, the sound of a bone, breaking the sound of a world ending. It sliced through the poisoned, suffocating silence that had followed Serafina's retching. Bailiff. Judge Warren said, her voice terrifyingly calm. Give Miss Hayes a water bottle and a sick bag, and then see that she returns to her seat. She will not be leaving. The courtroom, which had felt like a stage, suddenly felt like a trap. The doors seemed a mile away. Serafina, her face smeared with mascara and bile, was half carried back to the gallery bench. The smugness, the victory, the sly, confident smirk, it was all gone, burned away by a truth so vile it had curdled her insides. She was just a 25-year-old girl, shaking her cheap gardenia perfume, warring with the acrid smell of her own sickness. She stared at Marcus, her eyes wide no longer with adoration, but with a dawning animalistic terror. You knew, she whimpered the words, barely audible. Oh my God, Marcus, you knew. Marcus Carter, for his part, looked as though he'd been struck by lightning. The blood had drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy grey-green pallor. He was a statue of a man, his $5,000 suit suddenly looking like a cheap costume. He opened his mouth, but only a small, dry, hissing sound came out. He, the master of the universe. The man who bent Wall Street to his will was utterly, completely silent, His lawyer, Robert Sullivan, was the first to find his voice because his was the voice of self-preservation. "Your Honor," Sullivan stammered, shuffling papers he wasn't seeing. "In light of this frankly undisclosed information, a genetic anomaly, Judge Warren's gaze, which had been fixed on the two defendants, slowly swiveled to the shark. Her eyes were not angry. They were worse. They were cold, like the bottom of a frozen lake. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, her voice so soft it was more menacing than any shout. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have seen greed. I have seen malice. I have seen stupidity. But in you, sir, I see a toxic combination of all three. Your Honor, I must object. I represented my client based on the facts he provided. Did you?" The judge fired back. "Or did you, Mr. Sullivan, a man who has built a reputation on making problems disappear, fail to ask the most basic questions? Did you fail to do your due diligence? Or did you perhaps know? Did you know your client was suborning perjury from Ms. Hayes? Did you know the affidavits you waved in my face were pure, unadulterated fiction? But I had no knowledge of any of this," Sullivan sputtered, gesturing to the DNA report as if it were a snake. "You built your entire case on the slander of a pregnant woman, Mr. Sullivan. You stood in my courtroom and you weaponized her therapy. You called her unstable, a liar, a gold digger. You did this, knowing your client had a witness." She pointed a shaking finger at Serafina, who was also his lover. "You are a disgrace to your profession, sir, and you are, in my opinion, an accessory to this fraud. Your Honor." "Are you at this moment, Mr. Sullivan, filing a motion to withdraw as counsel before I file a motion to have you disbarred?" It wasn't a question. It was an order. Robert Sullivan, the shark, the killer, the man who had terrified Elena just an hour before, deflated. He visibly shrank. "Yes, Your Honor, I file to withdraw. Then get out. My client. He is no longer your client. He is a defendant in my courtroom, and you are a cancer I am excising. Get out of my sight, now." Sullivan didn't need to be told a third time. He and his two junior associates, their faces white with the humiliation of their boss, scrambled to gather their briefcases. They didn't walk out of the courtroom. They fled like rats from a sinking, incestuous ship. The thud of the courtroom door closing behind them was another sound of finality. Now there was no one left for Marcus to hide behind. It was just him, her, and the judge. Judge Warren leaned forward, resting her weight on her forearms. She removed her glasses as if to see him more clearly. "Mr. Carter," she began, and the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. "We are now done with the theatrics. We are now at the reckoning. You came into this court a man of immense power, wealth, and privilege, and you used every ounce of that power for one purpose, to destroy the woman who carried your child." Elena sat her hands on her stomach. She wasn't crying. She wasn't smiling. She was just breathing. It felt like the first clean breath she'd taken in a year. "You are not just an adulterer, Mr. Carter. You are a moral vacuum. You are a predator. You found your own sister." "I didn't know," Marcus shrieked, finding his voice at last. It was a high, reedy sound, nothing like the baritone that commanded boardrooms. "Not at first. I was helping her. She's my family." "And when you did know," Judge Warren's voice was a whip crack. "Because the PI's reports, which Mr. Chen so helpfully provided, show you confirmed the familial link 18 months ago. You knew. You knew, and you continued this relationship. You brought her into your home. You installed her as your assistant. And you flaunted her in front of your wife. She's a... Marcus's head snapped to Serafina. She seduced me. She's the one. She knew I was rich. She's the gold digger. He's lying, Serafina screamed, launching to her feet, her eyes demonic. You pursued me. You told me you were my mentor. You told me I was special. You used me. You sick bastard. Sit down, Judge Warren roared. Both of you. You are two vipers in a nest of your own making, and frankly I don't care who bit whom first. You are both responsible. But you, Mr. Carter, you are the one married to Ms. Undress, and your reckoning is now. She began to issue her rulings. It was not a judgment. It was a systematic legal and financial vivisection. 1. The pre-nuptial agreement is, as I've noted, valid. The infidelity clause is hereby triggered. Your entire case to nullify it was based on perjury, a fact we have established. Ms. Undress, therefore, is awarded her due. 2. The marital assets. Per the clause, Ms. Undress is entitled to 70%. Let's be clear what that means. It means 70% of the value of the penthouse you shared. It means 70% of the value of the Hamptons estate. It means 70% of your art collection, your stocks, your bonds and all liquid assets, and most importantly, here the judge smiled a terrifying thin-lipped expression, it means 70% of your shares in Carter Innovations. Elena's head snapped up. She looked at David, who gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. Judge Warren continued, As of the strike of my gavel, Mr. Carter, you are no longer the majority shareholder of your own company. She is. Your wife, the woman you called unstable, is now effectively your boss, though I doubt she'll keep you on. A small, strangled sound escaped Marcus's throat. This was worse than jail. This was annihilation. 3. The child. Judge Warren's voice softened, but only when she looked at Eleanor. Ms. Undress, you are awarded full sole and legal custody. Mr. Carter, you will have no contact, no visitation, no parental rights of any kind, ever. You are not a father. You are a biological antecedent, and you are a clear and present danger to the moral and emotional well-being of this child. You will, however, pay the maximum allowable child support under New York state law to be garnished from whatever is left of your assets. 4. You will pay all of Miss Undress's legal fees. Mr. Chen, she nodded to David, submit your invoice. I want it paid in full by the end of the day before the asset freeze. Asset freeze. Marcus whispered the word, hollow. Oh yes, the judge said. As of this moment, I am freezing all of your personal and business accounts, pending a full audit by a court-appointed forensic accountant. I have a feeling a man who would lie about this would have no problem hiding money. We will find every dime. Elena watched, detached, as the man she once loved, the man who had flown her to Paris for escargots, was dismantled piece by piece. She felt no pity. She felt no joy. She felt a great, cold, empty quiet. The quiet of a battlefield after the bombs have stopped. And finally, Judge Warren said, picking up her telephone, bailiff, secure the defendants. What? Marcus's voice was a panic. Secure. This is a family court. Not anymore, Mr. Carter. The bailiffs moved from the walls, one toward Marcus, one toward Serafina. You have committed multiple serious felonies in this courtroom. I am, as we speak, contacting the district attorney's office. I am recommending you be charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. I am recommending you be charged with perjury. I am recommending Ms. Hayes be charged with perjury. And I am turning over this, she held up the second DNA report, to let them decide on the appropriate criminal charges for consanguinity. No, Serafina shrieked as the bailiff put a hand on her arm. She became a wild thing, clawing, spitting. No, it was him. He lied to me. He's the one he knew. He used me. He's a monster. Get her off me, Marcus shouted, recoiling, as Serafina tried to lunge at him. She's insane. Mr. Carter, the other bailiff said, his voice bored. Hands behind your back. You can't do this, Marcus roared, his last defense. Do you know who I am? Yes, Judge Warren said, putting down the phone. We all know who you are. You're a liar. You're a fraud. And as of today, you are a nobody. The bailiffs cuffed him. Marcus Carter, CEO, Titan Master, stood in a beige courtroom in a $5,000 suit with his hands zip-tied behind his back. As they were led out, Serafina's sobs and screams echoed down the hall. You ruined me, she screamed at Marcus. You ruined my life. Marcus just stared ahead, his face a mask of such utter catastrophic ruin that it was almost inhuman. And then they were gone. The courtroom door clicked shut. It was over. Elena just sat her hands on her stomach. The silence that filled the room was vast. David Chen, the quiet bulldog, slowly, meticulously began to pack his briefcase. He snapped it shut. Elena, he said, his voice gentle. She looked up at him, her eyes clear. The tears she shed now were not for Marcus. They were not for the life she'd lost. They were just a release. A long, slow, final exhale of 8 years of fear, hope, and pain. He picked a fight with a mother, she whispered, echoing his words from so long ago. He did, David said. He held out his hand not to help her, but in a gesture of respect. You did the work, Elena. I just filed the papers. She shook her head and, using the table, pushed herself to her feet. She was a pregnant woman, standing tall in a courtroom that had tried to destroy her. She was the victor. David walked with her to the door. He opened it, not into the drab, hostile hallway, but into the main atrium of the courthouse, where the late afternoon sun was streaming through the high windows. The light hit Elena's face. It was warm. It felt real. She walked out of courtroom 3B, not as Mrs. Carter, the humiliated wife, but as Elena Andres, the woman who had burned a kingdom to the ground to save her child. She walked past the empty gallery, past the bench where Serafina had sat, past the table where her husband's life had ended. She stepped into the atrium, and the sunlight was so bright she had to squint. She took a deep, shuddering breath, filling her lungs with air that didn't taste of lies and gardenia. Her daughter kicked a strong, steady tap-tap-tap from within, a promise, a new beginning. Elena placed both hands on her stomach, and for the first time in a year she smiled, a real, genuine smile, and she walked one slow, powerful step at a time toward the light. The story of Marcus and Serafina ended as it was destined to, in flames. Carter Innovations collapsed when the news of its CEO's incestuous, fraudulent, and criminal behavior hit the press. Marcus Carter, facing a dozen charges, was convicted and is currently serving a 7 to 10-year sentence. Serafina Hayes, in exchange for her testimony against him, received probation and has since disappeared, her name forever, a synonym for a scandal of biblical proportions. And Elena, she gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl named Olivia, after the sister who had been her rock. She sold the penthouse, she sold the Hamptons estate, and she moved to a quiet, sun-filled home in California. She reopened her art gallery, and she is raising her daughter to be strong, to be honest, and to never ever let a man dim her light. Sometimes the truth doesn't just set you free. Sometimes it has to burn the whole world down first, so you can build a new one from the ashes. If this story of justice, survival, and the ultimate shocking twist kept you on the edge of your seat, imagine what else we have in store. Don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves a story of epic revenge, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel. Click that bell so you never miss a single shocking story. You won't believe what's coming next.